I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Clark Smith, to get things started. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin. Good afternoon, all. Hope you enjoyed the Thanksgiving holiday. Thanks for joining here our info session around the EDA's current program suite supporting our innovation economy here in New Jersey. I would note the presentation may slightly differ from the typical EDA presentation you may be used to seeing around innovation, life science programs. Today we will not take as much of a deep dive into a series of program regulations, but instead we're going to start with a little background around the EDA's methodology, around how we design programs that are targeting our technology ecosystem here in the state. Then we'll run through a series of programs giving a high-level overview around major eligibility requirements. The final section then we'll outline program fit for businesses. So for entrepreneurs, you can kind of start to work out in your mind where you should look for the programs that may assist your business. And then, of course, at the end, we'll have time for Q&A, during which the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A feature to put your questions in. Once we get to the end, though, you can always raise your hand and we'll allow for live questions. So let's get right on into it. So here are some highlights around the innovation programs that the EDA offers. So give or take over the last year or so, we've had 18 different innovation programs. So those are initiatives which target the specific innovation economy. And that doesn't include 6 programs from the newly launched Commission in Science, Innovation, and Technology. They're designed around offering a continuum of support to the ecosystem. So servicing all stages of business as they progress through the stages. And that's from very early seed to angel, then through venture-backed companies. We're geared towards strengthening the components of the ecosystem and growing jobs here in the state. So unlike maybe a traditional investor in a startup, returns are great, but that is not our top line priority. We want to see strong businesses that grow jobs here in the state too. That is a real priority of our organization. Our programs here, they support a variety of drivers, I would say. This could be capital access, technical assistance, and so on. We'll go into more detail on that. We have several financing programs for different stages of company, and financing is a more universal term. As I mentioned earlier, the Commission, CSIT, is predominantly focused on very early companies and that have a university component to them. And the last thing I would just add is that all of our programming is designed around executing the governor's economic development plan. So there's 2 key strategies that we've used in designing the programs that we offer to support the innovation economy. And that first strategy that we think of is offering a continuum of support. So we've broken down the life cycle or growth stages, you could say, of how a technology startup would go through its business life cycle into 3 stages, which we'll discuss now. So the first one would be companies that are in a pre-seed phase. So when we're talking about a product, they're still in ideation or maybe coming up with a minimum viable product. They're running trials around alpha, beta trials, maybe piloting with a few initial customers. Still in the phase of developing your organizational structure and really looking for guidance and support to help build the company. And we move into phase 2, we have an early stage business. So product is pretty well baked, getting some sales traction and really finding what that target market is. There's a core team for the company, and you're starting to grow and add jobs. There's a pretty formal business structure as well. and looking for initial outside capital coming into the company. Then that final phase that we talk about is we consider growth or venture stage. You've already raised some outside capital in the company and are looking for more from a professional investor or fund to really scale the business, their sales, but are looking for that hyper growth, maybe looking for new types of ways to acquire customers and really hire large amounts of employees to build out departments. Then the second strategy that we were looking at when we think of how we design programs is essential economic assistance. So an economy has various inputs that are needed to function effectively. We picked 5 critical areas that we target to support to accelerate growth within the ecosystem. And here are the 5 that we have honed in on. So ecosystem building, so that is really around community and helping everyone connect to develop relationships. That can be with the large corporates here in our state, down to early stage companies just getting off the ground, and then other inputs into the economy like investors, service providers, and universities, all trying to link those folks together to build a community. Another area is technical assistance. So that could be access to thought leaders or tailored programming that helps drive certain skills to build a business. Capital access is pretty straightforward. So it's direct financial support, but that's more than just investments. That could be notes or loans, grants, or various forms of tax credits. Another focus point is place-based support. So that could be actual helping to get people into physical spaces. I know in COVID times it's fallen off a little, but we will continue to get back to normal. And that also is around events. So being able to anchor different programming events here in the state. And then final core sector that we look to help drive the economy is in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Probably not the best description, but right, we're only as strong as our weakest link. There have been historically underserved communities that now is the time to look to provide additional assistance to bring them back into and up with all of our other players in the economy, because so we can all grow together. So now we'll move into a second phase of the presentation here, where I'll actually go into the initiatives or the program specific. The first one that I wanted to highlight for folks is NJ Founders and Funders. So this is a twice-a-year event that we organize to help connect New Jersey's emerging technology companies and entrepreneurs with our local investor community. So this has been sidelined due to COVID and large gatherings being on pause. But I will note right off the bat that we are planning to resume these in 2022. If this was something of interest to you, the process for registration on the web, the link is right up at the top. So it's application.njeda.com/TLS. But again, in this event, the goal is to create links between entrepreneurs and our investors here. Companies get 10-minute one-on-one meetings during an event, usually from 5 to 10 meetings. And we curate them to try to get everyone industry and stage appropriate connections. That's both the entrepreneurs and the investors. What's the requirement for a company to participate? Well, it goes from companies in the venture at the top all the way down to just getting started out. What we want to see is companies have to be registered to do business in New Jersey. They'll have to provide to us a 1 to 2 page executive summary around their venture. And of course, it's you have to pre-register and receive an invite. It's not just a general open event. The other things we would highlight, I would say, is be prepared to speak with investors. This should be something that you're working on full time and is really ready to execute with outside capital. The next initiative I'll highlight is Golden Seeds. So in 2020, we partnered with Golden Seeds, which is a national angel group. It's dedicated to investing in women-led startup ventures. So you have to have a woman in the C-suite or a high-level founder. With this, we have office hours for New Jersey companies. They're held once a month, 10 times a year. And in these office hours, this is the main avenue to getting into the group. And you can get candid feedback from all of the members. So far, our chapter has over 30 angels. Almost all of them participate regularly in office hours. Since inception, we've had over 100 connections between New Jersey's entrepreneurial community and the New Jersey chapter. Back in 2020, they did a significant amount of investment, over $4 million nationally. And this year, the whole group of Golden Seeds has done over 18 new investments just this year. NJ Accelerate, through this program, we are partnering with best-in-class accelerators to provide New Jersey entrepreneurs with access to these programs. And then for graduates of the program to locate here in New Jersey. Well, how do we do that? Benefits for an accelerator, obviously we will promote them here and help get New Jersey entrepreneurs to find their programs. We will also provide benefits for them to hold events in New Jersey. The benefits for graduates of these programs, well, there's a direct funding component that would match the accelerator's investment that can be up to $250,000. And there's also a rent support aspect. So a graduate could move into an approved NJEDA space for up to 6 months with half of that for up to a year. 6 months of that at least could be subsidized by the EDA. And when we're talking about accelerators, I know that term can be used kind of flexibly, but we're looking for programs that have a fixed curriculum, an educational component. There should be a cohort structure to it. Again, that's fixed term in the fact that there is a graduation from the program, and the accelerator should be making an investment into its graduates. There is a benefit for every aspect, bonus around DE and I factors that both the company or the program may have. NJ Ignite, this program helps defray the cost for a company's rent into their first lease at a New Jersey collaborative workspace. So currently we have over 20 collaborative workspaces approved here in New Jersey. That could be an incubator or co-working space typically. And what the benefit for the company is, at least 50% of your first lease with this collaborative workspace would be covered for you at free. And that's a combination of the EDA and the workspace itself providing a benefit. The maximum lease could be up to 18 months. Typically it's a year, but we could go up to 18 months, of which 50% could be covered. When we're looking at a company, you cannot have used a previous co-working or collaborative facility in New Jersey prior to this. You must have less than $1 million in revenue in total and be less than 7 years old. There's also employee total requirements capped, so less than 10. One of your employees has to be working in the space, and you have to be a tech company in a targeted industry. We'll talk about targeted industries later. Bonuses come into play for workspaces in opportunity zones, or maybe tied to a university or a healthcare system, or brand new. Businesses that are women, minority owned, certified, or maybe this is their first landing here in the States. So for foreign companies, there's an extra bonus month that can be stacked on the 50% that you're already receiving. Angel tax credit is quite a popular program nowadays. In this, investors in qualifying technology and life science companies can get a refundable, which is cashback tax credit, from starting at 20%. There are bonus factors for companies located in opportunity zones or woman minority owned businesses, which could get a 5% bonus, bringing that tax credit up to 25% of the investment amount. When we look at companies, you have to have full-time employees. So specifically, now we're getting into the sections where full-time employees are W-2 based, or employees that work at least 35 hours a week and are getting taxable wages. So there has to be at least one full-time employee in the company, but no more than 225. Of these, 75% have to be working in a New Jersey location. The company must be an emerging technology company, so commercializing an eligible technology. Investments, and there's a key one, have to be non-refundable transfers of cash to be eligible at the time. So what does that mean? Things like notes are probably not going to convert, because when we look into the documentation itself, they in theory could be repaid. But other transactions, most notably equity, would qualify at time of investment, because there's no clause in the transaction or agreement that says that it could be repaid in cash. An application has to be submitted to the program within 6 months of an investment being closed. And as I noted earlier, there are bonus factors that can give an additional 5% of the credit amount. Through 2020, there's been significant amount of applications approved for investments. We're pushing over 2,000 now. Up to 2,000 applications have been approved. 650 million plus of investment here in the state. The next program up is the NOL program. So this allows unprofitable New Jersey-based tech and biotech companies to sell a percentage of losses to unrelated profitable companies. Big driving factors around eligibility for the company itself. Unlike other programs, this has a minimum amount, not percentage, of full-time employees that work in New Jersey. This is tied to how long your company has been in business for or formed. Less than 3 years, a company is required to have 1 employee in New Jersey. 3 to 5 years, that goes up to 5 employees in New Jersey. And after 5 years, a company must have at least 10 full-time employees here in New Jersey. And then from employees on a total view, can't exceed more than 224 in the US. A company must have what we call PPIP, which is protected and proprietary intellectual property. That means a patent somewhere in the application process that is primary to your business. Copyrights with the Library of Congress around the product, so that normally applies to software that is copyrighted as digital content, as opposed to having a patent. And then the third is an exclusive license to either a copyright or a patent. And we see this a lot with spin-outs. A company must have been running at an operating loss for the last 2 years. CPA prepared financials verify that. So companies have to be getting outside prepared financial statements for the last 2 years. And the one thing I would note, it's not around eligibility, but it is important from a benefit standpoint. Your business must be a taxable corporate structure and filing corporate business tax returns with the state of New Jersey. We see this fairly regularly, that a company is structured in some sort of pass-through, like a LLC or partnership structure, they could be eligible to participate in the program, but given this tax structure, they have not accrued any losses because those are passed through to the underlying members. So they get approved, but they have zero benefit. So one thing to think of. Program has been in place for many years. Every year we now have a $75 million pool that we can allocate benefits from. Since inception, pushing 600 companies that have participated and have been able to sell over $1 billion worth of benefit. Direct company investment. So the EDA does have programs when a company is raising funds from an outside investor. We could look to participate with our own structure of investment. It's a convertible note in all forms. It's always matched to outside investors. And it does come with a warrant that would allow the EDA to purchase future equity. So the different funds that we use is the NJ CoVest. That's the earliest stage where we could make an investment via a 10-year convertible note. Our note amount could range from $100,000 to $250,000. The term on this is 10 years. We match, again, outside investors, angels or funds, on a 1-to-2 basis. So for every $2 that the company raises, the EDA could match it with $1. The note itself is unsecured. A company needs to be generating sales revenue from at least 3 customers. They must have full-time employees, of which half of them are working here in the state. Then under the umbrella of Edison Innovation Funds, there are 3 different subsects for that fund. Angel Growth is for smaller companies, and this is a 5-year note. It's at $250,000, same matching as Angel, as a CoVest, but actually I noted that they're saying unsecured. All Edisons are actually secured investments. So a UCC would be filed for business assets along with IP in the company. But the Angel Growth targets funds raised from individual angels. There is a sales revenue requirement for the business, and the full-time employee amount for all Edison is 75% in New Jersey, or there could be a hiring requirement. If we move along, the most common Edison fund utilizes the VC Growth. In this, we can make direct investments up to $1 million. Again, the notes are 5 years, but the match is a higher ratio. We can match dollar for dollar as opposed to $1 to $2. The matching source here is a professional institutional investor, so venture capital funds. The company does have to have a minimum amount of revenue, so that's to cover whatever our exposure is. So to receive $1 million, a company would have to be doing at least $1 million in revenue in the last 12 months. Again, same full-time employee requirements, 75% here in New Jersey, or there could be a hiring requirement. So typically 10 new employees here in the state. The final sect of the Edison Innovation Fund is our growth, and that is for companies that have received investment from either the other 2 earlier funds, the VC, and have received a follow-on round of funding. So we could participate once again via this Growth Stars Fund. Around real estate, and this is pretty tailored, we do have the New Jersey BioScience Center in North Brunswick on Route 1. Here we have our incubator, so for very early stage bioscience companies that are looking for small wet labs, they can look to locate here in North Brunswick. And then we actually have what we call the step out labs, which is for that next level company that's not really incubator, but and needing a small lab. They need that next level support and a larger footprint for their business. And I'd also note the Commission on Science, Innovation, and Technologies support for entrepreneurs. This is very honed, I would say, for the most tech of the tech companies. One of their offerings is Research with New Jersey, which is easy enough. The website is Research with NJ. And this is a portal that connects industry with academia and our university system. It's a searchable database that relates the STEM capabilities at 5 university partners. It's currently Montclair, NJIT, Rowan, Princeton, and Rutgers. And it can relate actual researchers, the capabilities they have, what their research is, facilities that are available at these various universities, and the IP that they have developed. The Commission also has financial support programs, so various of grants, some that are industry specific around clean tech and biotech. There's a new one launching, and then other ones that can match the federal level grant funding that the company may receive from either SBIR or STTR. And they have a mantra as well around diversity, equity, inclusion. So focusing on inclusive engagement here in the innovation economy, and a new program that is just being launched is around supporting female entrepreneurs, and a grant around that. So. And the last section of the presentation here is going to be around program fit. So if you're an entrepreneur, we've discussed the programs and how we think about the design. Well, how do you evaluate to give a rough determination of what's best for me? Where should I look for more information? What's something maybe we can leverage to grow our business here in New Jersey? So the first thing you should consider is the targeted industry that you're in. So most innovation economy programs are designed to support product-based technology companies. So product-based technology, what is that? I think it's best represented by examples. So if your company has developed an online or mobile application around, let's say, financial services, delivering brokerage services to maybe financial advisors or even retail investors, they can buy and sell equities on your platform. Let's think of a Robinhood here, tech company, product-based. If you're a financial advisor that provides advice to clients and they use a website to access maybe their stock portfolio, not product-based, it's more of a service. Another common example I give is maybe it's a food-based product. You have a store that sells exotic cold-pressed juices. Very interesting, but exotic ingredients does not necessarily mean technology a company. Now let's take, you have a product that was developed by a research scientist. It's a drink that uses a patented protein powder to help oncology patients keep weight on during chemotherapy. Technology company. You know, there's a little bit of a difference between those two products and the method that they are retailing them. Around technology term we use a lot, you can think of it in products in these targeted industries that I've listed. So there's 13 or so pretty straightforward definitions of what you would think nowadays of high-tech economy looks like. So we're talking transportation, new ways of manufacturing, aviation, you know, clean vehicles or autonomous vehicles, clean energy, life sciences and biotechnology, hemp processing, IT and other types of you know, computer-based technologies, fintech and professional services technologies, film, digital media, and then, you know, what I would consider agricultural technology type programs, food innovation, interesting stuff. And then if we take a look around what stage your company is in. So are you a pre-seed company again? So you're pulling together a product, you have maybe a couple founders, but you're still gathering a core team. You're building relationships with maybe potential customers. You're starting to talk with maybe accountants or a legal team and getting that business structure, organization in place. You're looking for advisors to help give some insight and tips to help establish your business. You would be in pre-seed. In the middle at early stage, well, now you have a product and you have some first sales, less than $1 million, I would say. You're generating revenue from initial customer base, but you'd like to expand that. You have a full C-suite or founders and management in place, and maybe a couple employees. You've established a formal W-2 payroll. You have internal operations in place. You're making filings with the government. You're doing formal outside prepared financial statements, and you're starting to get in some outside capital from those initial first investors. And then, the next venture or mature growth phase, these are companies that already have strategies and revenue in place. They're now trying to come up with new ways to scale, maybe go after different markets, improve their internal business operations. Again, they have some capital in-house from outside investors, but now they need to raise additional levels from a big institutional or a few large institutional investors that will give them the cash balance to really scale with speed. So how does that fit in here with the EDA with our program offerings? So we went through the programs, and this chart has them listed out pretty much in order along those different phases. So if you're in the earliest ideational phase of your business, just getting it off the ground, founders and funders, Accelerate, look at Accelerator, NJEDA, these are get your first office space. These are programs which are a better fit for companies in that stage of growth. As we move further down and the company gets a little bit more sophisticated, they've been around for a couple of years, are generating a good amount of sales. Now we start looking at things like the NOL program, because losses have accrued. Maybe we can look to monetize them. The CoVest fund, angel investor tax credit, once you start getting a payroll set up and have those outside investors coming in. Then as you get a later on stage, you start thinking about, so the Edison fund, larger space for the life science companies. If we go down, the last section is those CSIT programs. You see they skew a little bit more to the earlier side of things. But I would say research with New Jersey is available to all folks within the community, and something to look to leverage if you are looking to partner with the university system here. So that rolls up my prepared comments. So at this point, we can open it up to questions. First question is, does this apply in general for medical businesses? So, and in this, it specific is around therapy, speech therapy. I would say it would be down to looking at individual programs, but in general, I would say that therapy, whether it's some sort of physical therapy or more on the psychological type of gambit, those are services offered, not necessarily products offered. So if it's just utilizing outside technologies via service, probably most programs are not going to be applicable. Now, the opposite side of that spectrum, I would say, is if the service is also tied to a proprietary, maybe machine that the company also has developed, that might be different. It's been a few years, but I know, there was a lot of popularity in the past around tattoo removal. So companies would develop their own laser machines and then offer, a service around procedures. It's definitely widened since then, but that would be something that would be product-based, even though that's a service tied to it, but just straight outside services would not be eligible for most programs. All right, so the next program is, do I have to start with a specific particular program? Can I apply to multiple programs? So yes, you can apply to multiple programs at the same time. There is usually not any feature in our programs that by participating in one, you get excluded from others. And there isn't a particular entry point. You don't have to initially start with a co-vest investment to then be eligible for Edison. Same thing. NOL approved companies are then not excluded from participating in angel tax credit. The next question is around COVID grant funding. That it doesn't, like the COVID specific programs were not underneath the innovation economy envelope. But if you are specifically looking around, quote, grants and the programs that are grant funding, the commission programs, a lot of them are grants tied with other grants that a company has received. And NJEDA is also considered a grant. So around, the next question is around sacrificing equity or ownership in a company's business. Is there any funding mechanisms currently that don't include equity? So the different direct funding mechanisms under the innovation envelope technically are debt, but yes, they are tied to outside equity raises. So there is an equity component to it, even though it's not the EDA. Underneath the small business services provided here, the EDA, there's more of the traditional lending. If you're looking from a direct financing perspective, offered through the EDA, I would say that we also consider the other programs where there's tax credits involved, a different type of funding, but not what most people would consider like a direct investment. So what the following question would be around what type of documentation is needed. And I would say each program is different. So things at an early designed for an earlier stage, like NJEDA, it requires management prepared financials, fairly simple. Now, if we're getting into something like a direct investment for COVID, that's going to require a higher level of due diligence materials to the extent of maybe even outside prepared financial statements. So same thing that comes into play in the NOL program. So it's really specific to each program. The next question is around personal guarantees. So currently none of the direct investment programs that are targeting the innovation economy, so Edison Innovation or CoVest, require a founder personal guarantee. Yeah, so we are looking more towards the business assets, if it's secured, intellectual property, and the way that we structure the actual investment mitigates the risk as opposed to having the founder themselves guarantee the investment. Would these programs work for a consulting business? The consulting is pretty general nowadays. I would say some of the earliest stage company programs like Ignite could be leveraged, say if it's like an IT consulting business. But when it comes to the incentive tax credit programs or the direct investing, most of them in the eligibility requirements are going to specify that the company needs to be commercializing a product or a technology. What does non-transferable tax cash tax credit mean? So I think in transferable means that you wouldn't be able to probably sell it, but in angel tax credit, the line that I'm assuming this is directed to is non-refundable. So what that really means is that if you have a investment transaction and the transaction rules governing document, it doesn't specify that it could be repaid in it and receive cash back in any function or in any form. So if you think if it's a convertible note or debt or even some sort of safes, it could convert over to equity, which is a permanent transfer, permanent conversion, or it can repay in some form. It can give cash back. It could give a royalty stream. So that would all be considered as a refund of investment. Now, transferable, there is an aspect in some of the programs, especially angel tax credit, that we expect the rule is that the investment is held for at least 2 years and couldn't be transferred to another investor at the investor's discretion. So if the company has some sort of M&A activity, which creates a liquidity event, that's outside of the investor's control. So that would not prevent it. But what it's really trying to prevent is investors reselling their investment, or maybe it's already a public company and selling it on a third market from investor to investor. Can you please clarify? Oh, it's the same question. So I got that one twice. Scroll down. So I have two similar questions around making an appointment to speak with EDA representative, or the best way to contact us. So we will be sending, everybody here has been registered and we have your emails. We'll have a follow-up email going out with folks that's beyond just the web information, that will have links to all of the programs as well as contact information to get a hold of us. And then another question is around SAFE and that being considered non-refundable. So we would have to actually take a look at the SAFE. There's some specific rules around it, that it can't be charging interest and that there can't be some sort of preference in there that could repay. Nowadays it's become rather standard a SAFE, but I would say it's always behoove us to take a look ahead of time. If it's very plain vanilla, it will probably qualify. But there's also a question around our FAQ. The big ones, though, is around that there isn't any sort of feature that could repay as opposed to converting to equity, that could deliver cash back in comparison to just going straight to equity. Do any of these programs help nonprofits? I would say not many. I would have to look into maybe the earliest stage. The tax credit or incentive programs, where it's kind of a technical issue. Credits can't be issued to organizations that are not taxable. So, so those wouldn't be applicable. Same thing, a not-for-profit doesn't raise equity, so there couldn't be direct investment on that. Now, in the small business side, where there's more of the traditional lending, I think, and especially the new micro programs that they're coming up with, can be leveraged by nonprofits. I would also say some of the maybe grant programs like maybe Ignite could be used depending on what the targeted industry and function of a nonprofit would be. Thinking of experience of groups I've talked to, Girls Who Code, that's a program specific around helping young women learn computers and how to code in different languages. That's a nonprofit that we would take a deeper dive into and see if there's ways that either programs that we could help or connections within the ecosystem we could help them make around here in New Jersey. Oh, this one's a little longer. Give me a second to read it. So this one's around bootstrapped companies that have some sales traction. I believe is saying that they have not raised outside equity. So there could be things like NOL, or if they're in joining an accelerator, again, the Ignite program around maybe getting a first office space. But most programs are kicked off by an equity financing event with outside investors. Next question is around programs that require IP, specifically around patents. Does that mean issued patents? Typically, no. It's anywhere in the patent process, as long as it's eligible and up to date. So even for NOL, provisional is fine if it's within that first year and active. If a company has gotten a provisional patent 4 years ago and it never converted to a full application, or they haven't been keeping the financial upkeep required through the patent process because it's no longer current, that would make it not eligible. But typically IP is anywhere in the patent process as long as it's still in effect. So this next question is around having a digital tech application, and where's the first steps that I should go for startup funding? Well, with the EDA, I would say registering for the NJ Founders and Funders event, because that would be our, for lack of a better description, entry point for how we help facilitate entrepreneurs getting contacted up with our investor community. But I'd also say explore a lot more of the more general resources that are affiliated but not part of the EDA. So there's a lot of companies that don't really tie a large amount of cost to them. And sometimes it's low cost or no cost. By low, I mean like $10, $20 to participate in events, whether that's investor introduction events, office hours. So groups like Tech United, Tech Launch, even some of the university systems now are connecting with various groups that provide avenues to connect via office hours or to pitch your startup to various investor groups here in the state. Around safes again, so when are they eligible? So I would say in this, we really would want to take a look, but on the FAQ on our website, it depends if it is eligible at date of investment or conversion, really around the terms of the safe. So if the safe is very straightforward and says that at this time or this event, there is a conversion to equity, then it would be eligible when the safe was initially made, closed, invested, right? Because there's no way that an investor could not have equity and it's permanent. If there's any aspect of payment back to the investor, or the investor at their discretion can elect out, something like that, it's not going to be eligible until it is fully converted over. And as we're rolling up, I'll just skip right down to the last one, which is a plug for Judith and the commission. So they do have a new Catalyst Seed R&D grant program. There's an information session much like this one. It's on the 7th and it'll be at 10 a.m. The last question would definitely take more than 5 minutes to wrap up. So I would encourage folks, if you didn't get an answer or still have some areas for clarification, please respond back to the email that we send out. It should be going out in a few days and we'll follow up directly.